Hi, everyone. My name is Alan. I'm the CEO of SSV Labs, which is the core team behind SSV Network. We are the second largest staking protocol on Ethereum today, building a decentralized infrastructure both for validators and for composable and based rollups. We are basically 1 out of 10 validators on Ethereum today are running on SSV Network, roughly 4 million ETH. With 120,000 validators on mainnet today. We've launched 18 months ago, so that's quite a growth since then. And I've been in a space for quite a while, and Ethereum obviously has tech supremacy with the roll-up-centric roadmap, and really it's kind of innovative and risk-taking approach for innovation. And anyone who saw the latest Pextra fork, it's clear that Ethereum has both the developers, the innovation, and tech supremacy. It knows how to develop technology in an amazing way, but I think it also creates a lot of fragmentation. The roll-up-centric roadmap obviously enabled scaling Ethereum, but also created a bunch of roll-ups which are kind of their own economic zones. They don't really talk with one another, and fragmentation is quite frequent in this industry. And I think that creates a lot of problems. And one of them is really kind of a divergence between Ethereum, the token, and Ethereum, the blockchain. The blockchain is really successful. We saw huge announcements this week by Robinhood and Arbitrum, and it's going amazing. The token itself, though, is not that great, and the divergence is actually quite dangerous for Ethereum. One cannot survive without the other. We can't have a weak token and a strong blockchain. And so, in that in mind, I think that we really need to fix that. We need to understand how Ethereum can be both successful, solve its UX and fragmentation issues, but also the value capturing issues it has. And it wasn't always the case. In the past, there was a great alignment between the use cases on Ethereum and the token itself. Back in 2017, with the ICO craze, there was a really good reason to hold ETH, because the main thing you could do with Ethereum back in the day was to actually go into and buy ICOs. And so people bought ETH and then used them in order to buy into ICOs. That's a really great alignment between Ethereum the token and Ethereum the blockchain. 2022, we had the DeFi summer, where, again, you could use Ethereum in order to provide liquidity, trade. And so there was a great alignment between Ethereum, the token, and Ethereum, the blockchain. And again, a great alignment means that both of those are super successful. But what will be the next step? What will be the thing that will enable and unlock this great alignment between Ethereum, the token, and Ethereum, the blockchain? And I'm here to say or propose that it's going to be security. Ethereum is supposed to be this credibly neutral, decentralized, censorship-resistant infrastructure in which a bunch of different things are built. And I think if we can enable and unlock Ethereum, the token, to be the driver of it all behind the scenes, I think that will be an amazing alignment and a net positive for Ethereum. And I think the answer to that are based on composable rollups. Based on composable rollups are this kind of next evolution of rollup technology, which does a bunch of different things. One is it enables synchronous composability between rollups, the idea that you can interact with a bunch of rollups in one transaction in an atomic way. The other thing is actually that instead of having centralized sequencers by a company, that if that company breaks or goes out of business, the rollup is basically dead. We actually can have sequencing done by Ethereum validators. Ethereum validators are ultimately Ethereum holders, and by doing that, we can actually drive value to Ethereum itself. And so based rollups are this idea that we can harness, reutilize basically, the most amazing validator set in the crypto space, which is the Ethereum validator set. Almost 1.1 million validators, north of 30 million ETH at stake. That's not something any other blockchain has, and I think that is kind of the infrastructure on which we can build this next generation of rollups. So base rollups are this idea that L1 validators sequence or essentially build blocks for rollups. With that, we can do something really, really cool, which is called pre-confirmations. The idea that we can, instead of waiting for the block to go into published and then go into the L1, we can actually pre-confirm it, or rather enable the user a really crisp UI in which Once you click it, within 100 milliseconds, your transaction is crypto-economically verified and committed to, meaning that the user itself, when interacting with dApps, can have the best user experience by far from any other blockchain. Under 100 millisecond of transaction confirmation is something that no other blockchain has. And we can enable that with L1 validators in a distributed and censorship-resistant way. And the next thing of that, both being based and pre-confirmations, really the most amazing feature that enables us is that if Ethereum becomes this layer on top of which many rollups are being sequenced, or rather build blocks using Ethereum, we can do something called synchronous composability. Synchronous composability is the idea that we can have interaction between rollups and between rollups L1 with a user experience which is exactly the same like Ethereum, meaning you never left Ethereum. You can still use rollups, but the user experience you get is exactly the same like Ethereum, meaning you can interact with any contract on any chain, and Ethereum itself, within one transaction in an atomic and synchronous way. This enablement is really kind of the dream vision behind rollups. It's one, scaling in an horizontal way, which is actually decentralized, but on the other hand, it doesn't compromise on user experience. But in order to do synchronous composability, you need some kind of a shared element between rollups. And what is the best shared element we have between rollups? It's Ethereum itself, right? And so if we can utilize Ethereum validators to sequence rollups, we can also use them in order to do synchronous composability. So it's not just about decentralization and value capturing to Ethereum, it's about enabling something which is unlike anything we saw in the past. Moving away from this economic zone type of rollups where one big company controls the rollup and basically you are a user of that company, to a world where rollups are an extension of Ethereum and actually derive properties from Ethereum, like decentralization and censorship resistance and credible neutrality. And those are extremely important and are unlocked by this concept of using Ethereum validators as this shared sequencing layer for all of those rollups. This is the most Ethereum-aligned thing we can do. The rollup-centric roadmap we have today is amazing. It brings in giants like Coinbase and World and Robinhood and others. But we shouldn't mistake the fact that those companies are not Ethereum. They're amazing. They bring a lot of value to Ethereum. But they are not Ethereum. They're not dependent for their business on Ethereum. dApps, on the other hand, built on Ethereum, are Ethereum, because without Ethereum, they don't have any business. They have no right to exist. And we have to have this dichotomy in place, because we need to understand that both of those things can exist on Ethereum, but currently only one of them have rollups, which are the giant brand names. We need to create an alternative where actual dApps can deploy and scale with rollups. And the only way to do that is composability, because otherwise they cannot compete with the brand names. And so composability and base sequencing is not just about user experience and kind of the next evolution of rollups. It's actually the unlock of Ethereum-based dApps being able to scale and mature beyond just being a dApp into a rollup in of themselves, but still maintaining the actual properties and the philosophy behind Ethereum, which is Ethereum itself is always trying to be credibly neutral, decentralized, and censorship resistant. And the only path towards that is having rollups which are an extension of Ethereum and not an extension of some company, big or small. And so being Ethereum aligned is extremely important, but it also drives value back to Ethereum holders. If those validators are doing sequencing, if those validators are unlocking composability, it also drives fees back to those validators. And ultimately, validators are made up of Ethereum holders. And so we can also solve the fragmentation problem, secure a better future for Ethereum, but we can also kind of solve the problem of divergence between Ethereum the token and Ethereum the blockchain by driving more value from Ethereum the blockchain back to the token holders. And that's extremely important, and that's the future of Ethereum I think we all want to be in. And so if anyone is building something around that, based rollups in general, a dApp that wants to become a rollup, please reach out. We are deep in trying to revolutionize what rollups are to a world where rollups are actually an extension of Ethereum and not an extension of some giant company that only settles on Ethereum but is loosely coupled to Ethereum. Thank you so much.